Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the November 23rd regular council meeting. I'm sitting in tonight because this is the first reorganizational meeting. And Drew Anderson, the city manager. We'll go through, do call to order, and then we'll get the oath of offices and then the elections of the mayor and the mayor pro tem, then the mayor can take over. So let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Trish, go ahead and do the oath of office.
Legs there and raise your right hand. Repeat after me, raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and that I will faithfully perform the duties of the office of councilperson in and for the city of Norway, county of Dickinson, and state of Michigan, according to the best of my ability, so help me God. You three can sign here.
Okay, before we go into roll, I just want to personally congratulate Candy and Mark and Lee for the election. And I also want to personally thank Jeremy Oja for his time on the council. Mr. Oja did not want a resolution, so that might come up why we didn't do a resolution, but he did not want the resolution. But he said just the thank you is good for him, so I just wanted to personally do that. Trish, why don't you do the roll?
Mr. Ball.
Here.
Mrs. Brew.
Here.
Mr. Babalani.
Here.
Dr. Hayes.
Here.
Mr. Meneghini.
Here.
Okay, are there any candidates for election of mayor? Any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Dr. Hayes as mayor.
Support. Okay, we have nomination and support. Are there any other nominations for mayor? Are there any other nominations for mayor? One more time, are there any other nominations for mayor? Okay, none being, Dr. Hayes is nominated.
Mrs. Brew.
Yes.
Mr. Babalani.
Yes.
Dr. Hayes.
Yes.
Mr. Meneghini.
Yes.
Mr. Ball.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now I'll have nominations for Mayor Pro Tem.
I'd
Are
like to,
there-
go ahead.
Are there any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Babalani.
I'll support it.
Are there any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Mr. McGinney.
Lee, support. Any other nominations? I guess there can be. So we'll have roll first for Mr. Babalani.
Okay, Mr. Babalani.
Yes.
Dr. Hayes.
No.
Mr. Meneghini.
Yes.
Mr. Ball.
I'm sorry. No, I got a bad cold here and I'm not thinking right now.
Okay, that's all right.
No.
Mr. Ball?
No.
Okay. And Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Motion has failed. Now for roll call for Mr. McGinney.
Dr. Hayes?
Yes?
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Ball?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Babalani?
No.
Congratulations, Mr. McGinney, as our Mayor Pro Tem. Now we need to approve the minutes of the regular meeting November 2nd, 2015. Is there any discussion? Or I'd like to hear it.
There's no additions or corrections, so I can make motion to pass the
Motion made by Mr. Ball. Is there a second?
Support.
Roll call or?
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Ball?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Babalani?
Yes.
Dr. Hayes?
Yes. Now for the approval of the minutes in the regular meeting, or the approval of the manifest 2015-21, the amount of $656,827.06. Anybody have any questions on the manifest?
I thought, Doc, I know we have to pass them, but I'd like to take these home and review them. If there's any questions I'd like to bring up at the meeting.
Yeah, that's fine. Just so everybody knows, with the recount today, packets we couldn't get sent out or put out until after business hours, so that would be a good move.
I'll accept them the way they are, Ray, but I'd like to review.
Sure.
Does anybody have any questions at this time?
I do. On page 6, almost down to the bottom. Professional service, inductive automation. 5-day ignition core training.
Yep. The inductive automation is the human-machine interface software that we use for the hydro automation. And the gentleman that used to support that product dissolved his business and took another job, and we have no one for backup to fix any problems that might arise. So I was looking for another hydro type group. There was a group that we've used in the past out of Schofield, Wisconsin. They're very good at hydro and have worked in our hydro dam quite often. I approached them about being our backup support for this program, and they agreed that they would do it. They did not have anybody trained for that position on this software, so at a previous council meeting, I brought it to the council. We agreed that we would go ahead and get this individual trained for a 5-day class and pay for those expenses, so they will now be our support for this software.
So we're paying the training first.
We're paying for the training, yes. In the agreement that was made that we pay for the training, they will not use that person. If anybody else gets contacted by them for the inductive automation, they will not work on it unless it's cleared from us. And we already had a conversation and inquiry about it. And the way that I told them that I feel it should work out is if this other city, happens to be another city with a hydro dam, wanted to use this individual, that they would have to pay for half of those costs for the training also. So,
Then I also have another question for Joe. Under professional service, a little bit underneath that one, Simutech Group Phase 1 Tech On-Site Visit, what was that for?
Simutech is the firm that we are using to evaluate the hydro dam failure. They're the professional folks from Rochester, New York, that specialize in destructive analysis and testing for the hydro dam. They'll be giving us a report. It's due the end of December on why the hydro is doing what it's doing. So we'll know more at that time. But those are the folks, Simutech.
What is it doing, Joe?
We've got some runners, the new runners that we had built. The blades are cracking on them. Nobody can really, at this point, nobody can really say why yet. I'm waiting for this, the group to come back to us and give us their full destructive evaluation of why. And the council will be briefed fully when that comes in and brought up to speed. But Mark, you're probably the only one that hasn't gone down there and taken actually a look at what's going on. And I think it'd probably be good for you to get with me and go down there. I'd like to show you the runners and show you what's going on down there.
Okay.
So you're up to speed, so when we talk about it, you know what we're talking about.
Yeah. Thanks.
Are there any other questions?
I had some of the questions that Candy had, and then there's one on page 6, down on the bottom. Raised feed mill, 50 pounds of rolled corn. What do we do with that?
Everybody thinks we're feeding the deer, but we're not. The rolled corn works very well to stop the leaks around the gates at the hydro. So if there's a little bit of water spitting out, you take that rolled corn and dump it in there, and it catches in the current and sucks in the crack, and it seals it off. So we're getting all that rolled corn done.
Didn't they used to use cinders?
Yeah, cinders was if you go back to an old electrical plant that burned coal, the old clunker-style boilers, it would be the ash that came out, and it was in big chunks. And we used to use that, but it's extremely difficult to even find it anymore.
Wouldn't that be illegal according to FERC anyway?
Well,
Not FERC, but the DEQ.
the
Probably
DEQ,
too,
there's a
because
lot.
you've got acid in that ash, you know.
Yeah, once you burn it, there's a lot of irons and different things in there. So we've switched over to the corn.
Okay. Ray, on the golf course, I see some of the stuff was transferred on page 7 to the golf committee. Is any of the other stuff, I see on the front page, it says La Holmes chain and a padlock and stuff like that. So any of the stuff, is all of the stuff transferred and billed through the golf commission, or just certain things that are associated with the golf course?
Well, with the golf course operations, the site operations, that goes through the Golf Fund. The building maintenance and the building operations goes through the commission. So, you know, we pay out through the Golf Fund on those activities on the course itself.
Okay.
And that's part of our negotiation with them on a lease agreement.
Is that golf commission stuff all squared away now? or
No,
is that still?
no, we have to, in fact, that was one of the things I wanted to talk about later on, is
Okay.
progress on that lease agreement.
Okay. Joe, on page 7, Kaiser, the fabricating machine, the rebuild on number 3 for 14,000 and some change, 11,000, and then there was one there for 7. Is that the last of the major repairs on that unit, or are we just still involved with that?
The unit is still being repaired, Mark. The total amount that we have to spend on that repair that was approved by council was $120,000. To date, we've spent $47,000 of that 120, so there still will be more coming in. That number 3 unit is the vertical unit. It was the first time in 12 years that we've actually taken it apart and had to do work on that one. There was a lot of cavitation on the blade tips of the runner, and there were actually, I don't have them with me this evening, but I have pictures of the holes that were developed in the runner blades from cavitation. So what we're doing is we're taking about 8 inches of the blade tip and cutting it off and we're putting new metal in there and rebuilding that runner. It wasn't making as much power as it should, and because of the different holes, it was all out of balance and was banging around inside the draft chest.
Are we solely doing work now with fabricating machine, or some of this stuff, did it go out on bids?
The unit number 3 did not go out on bids. We are using fabricating machining quite a bit. The insurance company allowed them to do all the work on the new runners and all the repair on those. And to have someone close by that has the knowledge of how to work on those is very convenient, and I think probably saves us a lot of money. But I don't, to go out and send that runner way off somewhere else in the United States would be a lot extra expense.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else that, I know last time I was on the council, you were dealing with C.R. Myers for
Yes.
some of that work. Is that still?
C.R. Meyer, you're right, C.R. Meyer and Myron Construction are my two go-to for the mechanical portion. And when I take you through the hydro, I'll fill you all in on up to speed on what's going on down there. Those are the two companies I've been using for the mechanical labor part of it.
Okay.
And then the actual welding and machining is going down to fabricating and machining.
Okay. Then there's another one here for Myron Construction. It says 14,887. It says a claim. Is that something that was going to be reimbursed by the insurance, or what does it mean by claim?
That is correct. The insurance is covering the cost of the removal of the runners, the repair of the runners, and the reinstallation of the runners. Unit number 1 has been completed, and we have already received all of our monies on our insurance claim on those, unit number 1. Unit number 2 is still out of service. The runners are at fabricating and machining and being repaired as soon as we get the Simutech proposal back. And then, so yes, that you're going to see Myron on that.
So 2 and 3 are the only ones that are torn apart?
Correct. 4 and 1 are operational. Yep.
That's all that I have.
Anybody else have any questions?
I don't have anything, Doc.
And I guess we all reserve the right to question this at the next meeting. Is there a motion to accept the manifest?
I make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Roll call?
Mr. Ball?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Babalani?
Yes.
Dr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Menigini?
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions on the minutes manifest or the agenda items? If not, you'll have a further time at the end of the meeting to comment on any issue you'd like. We have no public hearing, and next is appointment and presentations of the Norway Area Planning Commission. Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This one is some housekeeping following the election. It's mainly to deal with council representatives on these two boards. We have the Planning Commission, and then we have the Zoning Board of Appeals. I have an explanation in my report on the creation, the compilation of these two boards. It's a partnership with Norway Township. We have one more month where on these two boards, as part of the agreement, there's what they call an alternating position. And so for 2 years, one of the municipalities will have the extra person on, say, the Planning Commission, and then after 2 years, then it goes to the Zoning Board of Appeals and back and forth. So like for right now, the city has 4 members on the Planning Commission. We have 3 members on the Zoning Board of Appeals, which one of them will be the alternating position. So we have 1 month where on the Planning Commission we'll have 4 members. Starting January, we'll actually have 5 members on the Planning Commission and 2 members on the Zoning Board. So we'll actually lose a position on the Zoning Board of Appeals. So following the election, Chris Gottstein was the city's city council representative on this board. Now, Chris is still a registered voter, so he is still eligible to sit. He has indicated that he's not interested in handing in his resignation at this time. He'd like to sit at large, but typically we had a council representative. There's nothing in the statute that says we have to, but, you know, we've traditionally had someone. So, you know, you could go a month where, you know, you leave the board as is, and then come January, or come in at the second meeting in December where we have our reorganization and appointments, you could appoint a council rep at that point to start on January 1st. So it's council pleasure, but at this point, we don't have a letter of resignation from any of your current board members. So you'll have to decide how you want to handle that.
Does anybody have any questions or any suggestions?
I would be interested in the planning commission because I'm really not gonna, I was chairman of the board for the zoning board, but I'm really not gonna be able to be on there because there's a governing body through the township, so I would be interested in the planning commission and giving up my seat. The only thing I could do for the zoning board would be to show up when Ron Matonich wasn't there, and I don't think that it's really gonna be an issue that he's not gonna be there.
I also would like to be appointed to the Norway Area Planning Commission.
Well, do we need to make a decision today, or do we,
No.
at the next meeting?
No, you really can go
We
until,
really should get letters from individuals who are wanting to serve
Right.
on the boards, and then,
you could go, you know, the remaining days, but 30, 45 days here where, you know, your board is set, and then you have a reorganization. You actually add a seat come January 1st, so you would have that open seat at that point. And then you don't know, I mean, the two members that are currently up come January 1st would be Lorna Flesher and Leonard Beadala. So, you know, I'd have to ask them. And of course, Chris, depending on what his situation is. So I think it's kind of up in the air. You know, at this point, though, they want to ride out the rest of the year, so that was why I didn't get any letters.
so at this point, we just want to write out the rest of the year and then seek letters of application from citizens.
We are advertising right now for all the boards. So, you know, come, like I said, that we have the, in your memo, we do have the advertisement, and I believe that the date is December 18th for applications to be in. It's that week. It's either the 16th or the 18th. I'd have to look at the ad. So,
Yeah, I think it's the 18th.
so you could stand as is.
Do we need a motion for that, or just let it ride?
No, you can just let it ride, just let it ride. The next item, though, on the zoning board of appeals, you do need a motion on that. As Mr. Papalani mentioned, right now, he is the chair, being, you know, duly elected to the council. We had a similar situation, remember last month, with Jeremy Oja, where we can't, by law, have two elected representatives. And Ron Matonich, who represents the township, is an elected representative that sits on the township board. What we did, if you remember, is Jeremy went to alternate, and we had the other two members. You know, Mark was a member, and then we had Leonard Beadala, who represented the Planning Commission, come on board. So what I recommend at this one is Mark take the alternate position, as you mentioned. If Ron is there, then he just couldn't sit. We can appoint him, but you can't have two sitting at the same time. So, you know, that would be just a situation if he's there or not there. So,
Well, you could sit, but without voting privileges, or?
yeah, he can be the alternate, but if Ron is present, then he wouldn't be able to take a seat if they needed a seat. So then the township has an alternate as well. They could seat somebody. But again, I mean, like I said, this is a 1-month situation. You know, we're gonna receive applications, and you're gonna reorganize. You actually lose a seat on this board. You'll be down 1 seat, so you can make a decision at your December 21st meeting.
So we need to make a motion for this meeting. What's the motion?
Well, you need to appoint Mark as the alternate, and then actually Jim Temrowski to become a regular member. So you're basically just switching the terms or the designations.
We have a motion to that extent?
I'll make a motion that Mark go to the alternate position, and who, Jim is, or Leonard Vita?
No, Jim Temrowski.
Oh, Gib, take his place.
Support.
Any discussion? If not, a roll call, please.
Mrs. Brew,
Yes.
Mr. Babalani,
Yes.
Dr. Hayes.
Yes.
Mr. Menegini.
Yes.
Mr. Ball.
Yep.
Next in communications, approval of mine pit fence brush clearing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item was up at the last meeting, and we were asked to, it was tabled, get some additional information, talk to this Mr. Van Ginkel. He was duly prepared to do the project, but we wanted to make sure that he understood the parameters. We did meet with, and Joe met with him, and they clearly understood the scope now, and he does have a price of $5,900 to do that project. Joe did put in an additional report, which kind of gives a little more detail as to what all needs to be done. I did also include the mine inspector reports, where he does expect us to complete that brushing activity, and then also some fence mending that goes along with it. At this point, you know, Mr. Van Ginkel is just going to be cutting the brush and setting it aside, out of the way, and the fence mending and some of the other activities are still going to have to, we're still going to have to do that. I do believe that under the, and Joe, I don't know if you want to talk about the bids and more specifically, but I believe that Makovsky did, you know, with their brush hog, did take it down from the stumps. But we talked about, at the last meeting, we talked about clearing the brush and then having a brush hog come in and just manage the stumps. So I don't know if you had a chance to talk to Makovsky about that. But
I don't have a price for Makovsky to remove. They just come in with the machine, but that is kind of, at the last council meeting we had, that was an option that was thrown out there to let Kevin Van Ginkel go ahead and start clearing the brush, and then have one of the other companies come back, probably Makovsky, because of the type of equipment that he has, and go ahead and remove the stumps and the brush stems so we can actually maintain the fence. One of the things that has happened, and I don't have the history of when that fence was actually put up around the mine pit. I'm going to guess it was probably from the mining company, but I don't know that for a fact. About half to 3/4 of the fence is down and needs to be rebuilt. So, according to the mine inspector.
Basically, the size hasn't changed. It's roughly 6 feet on each side of the fence that they want brushed out.
When we walked around, there's some spots where I can't get 6 feet on the inside the fence because it's a couple feet off the ledge of the pit. So we're just going to do it on one side of it, 6 feet on one side. And we're going to cut all the large timber that's across the fence and some of the small brush that's right next to the fence. What the plan would be, instead of doing this effort and then just letting it go and grow up again, and then 15, 20 years from now, someone is dealing with the same issue again. What I'd like to do is do about 6 foot on one side of the fence, make it so you can get through there with an ATV with a sprayer on the back and spray the wood chemical, at least on an annual basis or whatever they recommend in the application, and maintain this thing. Because once we get this up, it is a big effort to put this thing up. It's a 5-strand barbed wire fence, And like I said, there's probably, it's of the big pit, it's 5,362 feet, I believe, around the whole thing. And you're looking at about 3,000 feet of fence that has to be built. So it's going to.
Who has the mineral rights on that?
Mine company.
Then I think we should have Grant do some checking on it, because if they hold the mineral rights, they're probably gonna be responsible for the fence.
I think we should find out before we do anything myself, but in general, if you own the mineral rights, you don't pay anything.
But if you own the mineral rights, I would have Grant do some checking on it, because I was told by somebody that I think knows what's going on, that that's a very good possibility. So I think we should check on that before we make any decisions. Yeah, I know Kevin, and I think he would do an awesome job, but I think we need to secure that the rest of the job is done for no more than $4,651.28, because that's what the cheapest bid next to Kevin's bid is, and Kevin wasn't gonna be performing the total job. So I don't think we should be paying more, being we're using two contractors. But I like Kevin, and I think he would do a good job, as long as he's insured.
My question is, why don't we just use our own bulldozer? That would clear the stumps.
That is a thought. The bulldozer, it'd be wider than 6 feet. Kevin would have to clear probably 10 to 12 feet with the bulldozer. I think it's an 8-foot blade, and then the move around. On the west end of the pit, the fence comes right up to the hill. We can't really put a piece of equipment in there. We're just gonna cut some trees back. But on this east end, that would be a possibility. And then on the north end, where the homes are right up against the back of the pit there, there's not a lot of clearance there also between the pit and the fencing that exists at those spots. So it is a possibility that we could, in some spots, do that.
Because then that would replace the brush hog and someone
Yeah.
to cut the brush.
Yeah.
Just make one pass with the dozer. But I'd like to see it tabled as well till the next meeting, till we find out about the legalities of it.
Joe, I also have a question. How come with the 3 bids, the one bid wasn't for everything? Didn't we send specs out when we put the bid out? Why was this bid only for a certain amount of the project, not the whole thing?
Kevin was recommended to me. He's a local guy that does a lot of tree brushing. And so we allowed him to bid on just the clearing of the brush. He can't do any more than that. And, because he doesn't have any other equipment other than his chainsaws. But there wasn't really a spec. I just called the brushing companies. I'm familiar with Makovsky because they do a lot of big transmission line clearing. They have all the very large equipment for that kind of stuff. We've used Asplund in the past. They do the same type of work. And then Kevin was brought up as give him an opportunity, but he didn't have the equipment.
So it wasn't opened up for bids then? You just called?
No, yeah, right. It wasn't advertised for bids. What I did, I just called the 3 companies that I knew of that did that type, or the 2 companies, and then Kevin, that was recommended to me to call.
Is any of the other 2 companies interested in taking just the second part of that,
Yes, Makovsky
operation?
said they would come in with the equipment, but I do not have a price right now for that from them. So, but I can get that.
I think that's important, that we don't override their cost, being we're gonna use Kevin.
Yep.
I also would like to see what the cost is gonna be on
Sure.
the second part of the bid.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is there any other questions? This will be put on the agenda for the next meeting, and then you're gonna.
Need a motion to table?
Yeah, you can motion to table.
I make a motion, we table the mine pit fence brush clearing until we get further information.
Support.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Babalani?
Yes.
Dr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Menigini?
Yes.
Mr. Ball?
Yep.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Approval or request consideration for release of deed restrictions of Lakeside Builders.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This last item on the communications is, something that actually came up this summer where we had an agreement with Lakeside Builders or Mr. LaFave to sell properties up by the water tower. He had split that land as part of the sale agreement, split that land into 5 parcels, and the requirement was that he was to sell and build, or have 3 homes built in 3 years and 5 homes built in 5 years. And the 5-year period, he'd met the first part of the 3 homes in 3 years, but those last 2 parcels, he went past the 5-year period. So I contacted him and told him that, his intentions, he either needs to come to council to get an extension, or as part of the deed restrictions, the city would take back ownership of those remaining 2 lots. Initially, Mr. LaFave said that was to have the paperwork drawn up for the city to take back the 2 lots, but then he came back and said, hey, I think I got a buyer, would the city be willing to allow me to sell then the property? And because it's past the 5-year agreement, no matter what happened, it would have to come to city council to release the deed restrictions. So during this time, we did receive a letter, which I placed in your packet, letters from Leeds Real Estate. There's a buyer, and he explains in the letter what his intentions are. I believe you're here tonight, Lonnie. I mean, if you want to come up and explain what you're basically putting in your letter, what you're going to do with the property, but then, it's up to the council as to whether or not that they want to, or be willing to release the deed restrictions.
That's all the lots or just the one you're saying?
Well, the sale is just the 1 lot, so there's still the remaining lot that still needs to be dealt with. Again, Mr. LaFave did not send a letter asking for an extension. So at this point, Mr. Hale here has an offer out with Joe, and but we do also have some other concerned residents that wanted to speak, so I would recommend that we open that up at that point. But
I think it's important that the price, if Joe LaFave sells them, it does not exceed what he paid for them.
well, the main issue, and I believe we go through with this request, is the issue of building the house, as the primary residence. So, Lonnie, why don't you go through and just give us what you're asking.
My name is Ron Hale, from Norway residence since 2010. House on Mine Street. Small lot. We've been looking for a bigger piece of property, and this one come up. Made an offer, it was accepted back in September, and dragged out this long so far on sale. There was nothing in the original contract when I was buying the property, which was in CRC's office, until closing was supposed to be before October 10th, and it came up before October 10th, which it was a restriction. I've talked over with my realtor and Joe as far as, primary residence within 2 years. I think that's doable. My intention was to build just a garage for now, but I've come up with some plans where I could build a garage with an apartment on top. Our current home will be paid off in 5 years, and I wanted to build our permanent residence at that time. But I've been a builder since 1982. Of the Grand Rapids area. Work construction the whole life.
Any comments on this? Just come forward.
Brandon Hudson, I live at 1908 Summit Road, adjoining the property right next to there that he was talking about. When we came here, we bought the second property. There was 5 total lots. We bought the second property from the site. Basically, the deal was we buy it, we go back here. So that was fine. We went ahead and did that. And right now, there's still 3 lots open. There's only 2 houses built out there on that property, or on those lots, so there's 3 left. And the other question I got, I mean, as far as permanent residence, what's the qualifications? I mean, is that power, or would you put solar over? You know, does somebody have to drill a well, or can you haul water? The other thing is septic. You know, can you have a holding tank? Or do you have to actually build a septic for qualifications for permanent residence? You know, I had to build all these things. I mean, if that's the case where I can go and buy those other 2 properties and put a tiny house in there, then, I mean, this is kind of the same thing. And as far as that property that he's looking at also, I mean, I was informed from Lakeside that that property did have a wine shop that was filled in. And then also the overflow of the water tank actually runs down the middle of the property. So the tank doesn't shut off. The water comes all the way down there. Basically floods the road. It happened about 3 years ago. That's pretty much about it.
Anybody have questions or comments? Lee?
I don't know the answer to most of his questions. My question would be, it's all reverted back, supposedly it reverts back to the city because Joe didn't fulfill his agreement.
Right, we have to.
He bought,
Right.
how many acres was there involved totally?
Probably about-
5 lots for $20,000.
Right,
He paid us the 20. We've got the 20.
right.
And he doesn't get the bill, we get the property back. So technically, that's our property.
Technically, you have to, you can't just change the deed restriction though. We've gone
No,
through
I'm not
that
saying
before.
that, just,
But that's why it needs to come to council and
Yeah.
officially get that.
that's our
that deed
property,
restriction.
and we can supposedly do what we want with it.
Well, I wouldn't say technically it's our property, but technically it's still deeded in the property under the deeds for Lakeside Builders.
Even though he lost it to us,
Well, he hasn't,
because it's past his time?
what they're asking for is for us to consider extending it. Now, they have passed the time, we just file our paperwork to start the process to have it reverted back under the deed language of the property. Because I don't have I was looking through and looking for a copy of the deed. Depends what the deed, of course, says, but presuming the deed says the exact
Well, that's
same
what I
thing.
think we should do then.
If the deed says the same thing, then it's past the 5-year qualification, and the reversion is in place.
We, we have granted extensions in the past. So it wasn't a foregone conclusion. That's why I called them and said, you need to submit whether you're going to ask for an extension or if we start the process
And
with
if he had come and
paperwork.
asked for an extension, he may have gotten it, I don't know,
Right.
but he didn't.
And it's past the deadline of the
It's past
It's
the
past
deadline.
well, it's not past the deadline for extension. I mean, you can do that at any time you want, but your decision is to either give them an extension or deal with this property separately or just take it back. Because we can file for the paperwork on taking it back. Council says, no, we're gonna take it back, then we file for the paperwork. We can't file for the paperwork until you give us that direction. And so I was working through, with him on this issue. of filing for the extension or taking it back. So,
Now, there's something I don't understand here. If the extension's up, it's up, it should have been taken care of.
right.
Well, it sounds like Mr. Anderson's saying that we have to act as a council to take it back.
When was the actual time up?
Well, this past year.
Should
I
have-
understand, but, you know, the issue here is, are you going to deal with this singular property with an extension or, you know, allowing that sale, or do you want to just file for the, you know, to revert it back, and then we can work on any other sales after that?
So
Exactly.
reverting it back, what does that entail? I mean, that entails, do we have to pay all his costs? I mean, did he have it surveyed, or we just get the property back? Do we have to give him his money back in full? What do we give him?
Well, we've never done a reversion before. We've had, I think, 3 different contracts, and so this would be the first one that we're dealing with a reversion. I know that in the past, when we've dealt with some of our deed restrictions, that the language wasn't clear enough. And so, you know, we had to be careful on the language, and that's where, you know, they have Grant look at it, because there's actually a penalty if you just change the deed without proper due process. And we ran into that problem before.
So what actually does it state, Grant? Does it state, what do we give him back? If we give him back anything?
Well, under the terms of the purchase agreement, we keep the money.
Yeah.
We don't pay him
Okay.
back any portion
That's
for any of the
changed.
parcels, and I mean, it sounds like some of the parcels were sold. You know, I don't know exactly how this was broken up. It sounds like it was one parcel with one legal description. And the way the purchase agreement reads is in bold letters under paragraph 3, should the premises revert to the city for failure to comply with the provisions of paragraph 6, or any other provision, the monies paid by buyer to the city, as stated above, shall be retained by the city, and no part thereof shall be refunded to the buyer. So that's not the issue. It doesn't appear as though under the language of at least the purchase agreement, I'm sure the deed is reflective of that as well, that we would have to pay any money back. That's a pretty standard term. It's when you have somebody that comes to a municipality like this, and you provide them an opportunity to develop within our community, you know, they're basically purchasing the ability and the option to build and comply with those reverter provisions within that time period. And if they don't, they know it up front. It's in the purchase agreement, it's in the deed, and their monies are retained by the city. As to your other question though, Mark, as far as, and I would like to, again, looking at the deed, you know, if this is a 20-acre parcel, it sounds like it's been subdivided up. You know, the remaining parcel is what is left. You know, breaking down those parcels, we certainly don't want to file for reversions on property that's already been sold. So to just double check and make sure we do that, not to cloud anybody's title
Well,
appropriately.
The records that I pulled, he had 3 properties that were sold. There was one property that's 1.5 acres and another property that's 7 acres. So,
Why is there a discrepancy?
That's
between-
two.
no, there were 3 properties sold. There was one remaining property at 1.5 acres and the other remaining property, which Mr. Hale's looking at, is a 7-acre piece. That's
But
what
you
the
only
city
have
records
2
show.
houses up there. You have Brandon's house and his wife, and then you have Bercheski's up there right now. Those are the only 2 lots that sold.
These 2 right here.
But
I'm
it's
not sure
sold-
if you're counting on
Okay,
this one.
it's sold to
Counting on
one
this.
person then. These 2 lots are sold to one person then, because there's
It
only
must be
2
then.
houses up there. One is Ryan Bercheski and the other one
Well,
is
I looked in,
Brandon and his wife.
I looked in the lots,
No,
to
these
see
2,
what the sales.
these 2 haven't been sold because they're right next to me, and there's 2 lots there that are still there, because the lead sign is still there. Bercheski owns this one,
I pulled
Brandon
the-
owns this
I
one.
pulled this one and
You
it
did.
showed a property owner, not Mr. LeVay.
Well, then he sold that one when he wasn't supposed to.
Okay. I'll have to go back and double check that.
Well, I remember when this deal went down, it was roughly 5 years ago, a little more,
Yeah, it's,
and sitting down talking to our lawyer at the time, and everybody pretty much agreed, we wanted to make sure that all our i's were dotted and t's were crossed on this deal. And as far as I know, they were. And as far as I'm concerned, that property is back to the city right now. That's the way it should be. And then if we want to do something with Mr. Hale there, then we can deal with him.
And that'll be the direction that we go with. That's the way the council wants to move.
George, do you have any comments as well?
Yes. If we don't go by the book, we will throw the book away.
And that's why I contacted Mr. LaFave and said, you got one of two choices. Initially, he wanted me to move the paperwork forward to have the property revert to the city, and then he contacted me back and said he had this other opportunity, and so that's what we've been working through to get the paperwork to you to make that decision as to if you want to allow for that extension or that sale.
So let's get it back, and then we can work with Mr. Hale.
What about a
Properly,
house not being built on that third property?
Well, I'll have to
Wasn't-
go and double check that, because, like I said, I'll have to go back to our records. Our records show that that property was sold.
Cause there's only two houses
So
there.
we'll deal with that, then.
Technically, wasn't he supposed to build the houses himself? Wasn't this part of his
It was part of the
master
lakeside.
plan that he was gonna
Right, he would
sell
sell the
lots and
property and the house.
build the houses?
Yeah, he was gonna sell the property and the house.
The other concern I had, that there's no water or sewer to any of these houses?
No, the question about having to have a sewer, septic, and water, there's no municipal water or sewer in those locations. The area is above the tank. I don't know if you guys did you have to hydrofracture to get water, to get a well?
No, we went down forward.
Okay. I know that in some areas up there, that's probably a possibility. Also septic, depending on, I mean, you could do a mound system, or depending on how you have to do it, depending on the rock. But you would have to have a septic. You couldn't go up there and not have a septic. The health department would have those rules pretty straightforward. Just like water, you would have to have a well. You couldn't carry buckets of water, so.
Can that be hooked into that existing water tank or pipe?
No, it's above the elevation of the tank. You would need a lift pump to do that. That would be a project cost that you would probably want to address the city and take on yourself, yeah, at this point. I mean, it is a possibility. We'd have to look through, and again, we would have to go through our DEQ permitting. So, but you're right, that is a possibility.
Mr. Carlson, any other comments about this matter?
No, I think I've, covered that. Thank you.
Would anyone like to make a motion? Would anybody like to make a motion?
What do we,
The only other thing that I'd like to say, I was just talking with Ray for a few seconds here, and we have another one that has major property over there, which is Bruce Hawkinson, that he's already in his he's applying for his second extension, so you gotta keep that in mind. We're gonna have to be fair across the board if we do this with one.
Yeah, we gave him.
Bruce
a
is
first
already on
extension.
his second extension if he gets it, so.
Mr. LaFave hasn't asked for an extension. He's been notified twice, so we
Yes.
should, I don't think we should make anything definite tonight, but unless the council wants, but he should be given the opportunity to make an extension as well.
Well, Ray had said that he wasn't interested in extension, he was interested in giving the property back, right? Or selling it.
That was his initial conversation. That
initial
was our
conversation.
And then they asked about this particular piece, and so we focused on this piece, to come before council. I did promise that I would bring it to the council. It's not a decision I make,
Yeah,
it's a decision
yeah.
you guys make, so.
Well, you didn't fulfill his commitments.
No, he didn't fulfill his
He did not.
commitments, but the other one that I'm saying is you have Bruce Hawkinson out there to keep in mind that Ray said he's already applying for his second extension, so if you're taking this guy's property back, you're gonna have to watch what you're doing.
But you also gotta take in consideration, he didn't,
apply for an extension?
file for the extension.
Yes, I understand
That's a
that,
little
but
bit
how
different.
many extensions are you gonna give the person before they build over there on the other property? So I just wanted to point that out.
Doesn't, okay. So what do we need here? A motion to, my recommendation is we go through the proper procedure and get the property back.
Is that your motion then?
I'll support it.
That's my motion.
Any other comments? Otherwise, roll call, please.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Ball?
Yep.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes,
Mr. Bablani?
Yes.
Dr. Hayes?
Yes. That ends our regular meeting, I believe. So if anybody from the audience like to address the council on any matter, please state your name and address and limit your talks to 5 minutes. Anybody in the audience like to make any comments? Not, then we'll get council comments. Mrs. Brew, any comments?
No, not right now.
Mr. Wall?
No. Well, I guess I got a couple things to say. I have a little bit of a problem with the meter reading system that the city is gonna spend $740 or $50,000+ on in the next 3 years. I sat back and I listened to Scott Kenny's conversation on the shape that the city was in with the water and sewer project that we have coming on. I don't remember what the cost was. I think it was like $700,000, was it, Ray? Am I correct?
For the AMI?
For the water and sewer project, like, that we're gonna be doing for the street side of it.
Oh, on the
Streets
street
and
side,
everything.
no, that's it's a $2.8 million project.
Okay, we got a $2.8 million project. We have, the water fund is challenged according to Mr. Kenny. And we're gonna spend this money to simplify the shut-offs and the meter reading, which I don't feel we need it. And we're gonna be taking, if my memory's right, $310,000 out of the water fund, or out of the electric fund in the next 3 years, and $440,000 out of the water fund in the next 3 years. And I don't feel we need it. I talked to some of the guys that read the meters. They felt that Norway and Norway Township, we could read the meters in a day and a half. If we had the guys that read the meters at the part-time rate, which we have part-time people here with no benefits for $15 an hour, that comes up to $180 a month to read the meters. I don't foresee that there's a payback, and I think we should put a stop to this while we can until we get through this water and sewer project. Because right now we're $24 million plus in debt, and there's only 2,500 people in the city. That's $9,600 per person, per resident, that we're in debt. I think we need to reconsider this project and put it on hold until we got a good handle on the water and sewer projects that we already have going. The hydro's in turmoil, and we're gonna take $320,000 or $310,000 out of that fund in the next 3 years. I think it's crazy. We got to get a handle on the projects that we got going and get some streets paved before we open up another can of worms that we're not going to have a payback with.
I agree with Mark on that issue. I kind of looked into that too before I was going to be sitting here tonight, and I just don't see the payout. I think we have other projects going on that need to be finished. I think it's going to cost the taxpayers more money in the long run, and I agree. I think we should wait on this.
You know, we got a $2 million plus project, like Ray said, and that's if everything goes right. If it doesn't go right, we're going to be probably $28 million in a hole. And I know I think it's 1 or 9.2 million dollars is the pension fund, but that's real debt that has to be caught up and paid. I know it's long term, but it's still debt, and we're making a big mistake.
Mr. Pickard, could you respond to that, please, as far as that project? Or
Well, there's other things that are involved in it other than just reading the meters, and like Mark said, he needs to be briefed on fully of the whole project, but this has been in development for quite a few years. And so there has been developments that have happened after. You know, the contracts are already done with the companies. We'd have to take a look at what it would take to put those on hold or standby. But this was done before we discovered that there were issues at the hydro and already started. And some of the other things that Mark brought up, so.
I
I
was
mean, it's
told-
something that we could definitely have a conversation about.
I was told that the phase that we're gonna need to shut the meters off from City Hall is not gonna be realistic for 5 years. You know, we just went through, probably, Ray would probably know, but I think it was from 6 to 8 years ago, we went through this scanning, we changed all the meter tops on every meter that we had. We took the labor, we bought the tops, none of that stuff is gonna be any good. What are we gonna do with that? We didn't get any payoff from that. Now we're opening a can of worms with another major project.
When did we get those meters, Joe? We got those are secondhand when we got them.
The electric meters are probably 12 years old. They're electromechanical meters. They're the old disc type. And I bought them secondhand from a utility in Florida and had them refurbished for about a third of the cost of a new meter. The water meters, we never changed the actual water meter, as Mark refers to the digital top, or the top that goes on top of the water meter was added to it to be able to do the remote read with it from a drive-by system or a walk-by system. And that's, I'd have to look to be 100% accurate, but 6, 7 years ago, probably somewhere in that range, that was done.
You know, we need the water and sewer project because that's how we're gonna pay for a lot of our streets to be paved in the next 2 years. And this could possibly jeopardize it. We're definitely gonna have to borrow money for that project. And like Scott Kenny said, last time I was here, I listened to him, and he said that on a scale from 1 to 10, Lee asked him what position we were in, 10 being the best, perfectly fine condition financially. We're in a 4 right now. We're in a 4.
Well, technically, he said 4.5, but I'm not gonna argue over for half a point. But we should have been better, we could have been better. The biggest problem is our unfunded liability on that pension. That's what's killing us.
But it's still real debt.
Everything else is basically gonna pay for itself. Between rate increases, which nobody really wanted, but do you want new water lines and new storm sewers and new streets? You gotta pay for it. The unfunded liability, and we've lost ground on that. I've been here 6 years. We started off, I think it was 61% funded, maybe 62, 1 or 2% funded. Now, we're 47% funded, and that's because of MERS. I'm not gonna get into that, because we've been fighting that system, and Scott Kenny will tell you the same thing. That's our biggest problem right there, is our unfunded liability. We've tried to put more money into it. We're putting more money into it now than we ever have, and we're still losing ground. What's the answer? I don't know.
But borrowing and taking money out of the other funds, $750,000, is not gonna help anything when we're not getting any payback for that. And we're gonna be $28 million in debt pretty soon. We're going further and further in debt, and we're not getting many streets paved. And the streets are falling apart. I know we gotta take care of the infrastructure with the utilities, but this project is not gonna do that. This is a project that's just gonna simplify the shutoffs and simplify the reading. And we have a system right now that requires a day and a half's worth of service to read the meters. And, you know, I was told down at City Hall here that we're not gonna be able to shut them off for at least 5 years. And I don't think we should waste the money. I think we should put that on hold immediately until we get what we got under control.
What do you mean by
What's
won't
that,
be able?
Joe?
What do you mean by it won't be able to be shut off for 5 years?
Well,
don't
I was told that
understand.
I was told that we aren't gonna have everything we need, and we're not gonna be at a point where city can shut the meters off, all the meters off, from City Hall remotely.
Okay.
I was told
The
that.
only meters that we were going to put remote shut-offs
On the rental
are the
properties.
rentals, correct.
How many rental people shut their powers off? I own probably the majority of the rentals in town, and I never shut the water off.
Yeah, it's for non-payment.
So, I mean, I'd like to see the numbers on that, because if it takes, you don't have any other payback besides reading the meters, and you're paying $180 to read the meters per month, so
No.
you must have a lot of shut-offs
There-
that you're gonna,
There are some other paybacks, Mark. You're not aware of all of them.
how much
But-
money do you want to go in debt before we start recovering some of this stuff?
I'm not going to argue with you, I'm just telling you that there are more than what you're identifying right now. You don't know them all. The new meters are totally electronic. They pick up 3 to 5% more of the kilowatt hours that are consumed on the residents. So you can take our revenue probably of somewhere in the vicinity of $3.5 million and add 3 to 5% to that. That's extra money coming in to help pay for this.
And you're
the
also
water-
paying the interest on the money.
Yes. No, we're not borrowing the money. There's no bond to do this. This is out of general.
Yeah, but you're
Revenues.
taking money out of the general revenues. You're transferring money from the water department that you are going to be borrowing money to do the water and sewer project.
Well, Mark, we've set the water component of this up to go along with the health of their fund. You know, so we don't need to convert the water immediately. And we recognize that, because as the water fund, you know, until we get this project started, part of our problem with the water fund and the sewer fund on an annual audit basis, and the auditor knows this, and the auditor has said this, is that when we started that project, it was 2006. And, you know, there's $700,000 of engineering on the project. And when you go a couple years, and then the bond issue kicks in and you do the project, you don't take what they call a cash hit on that engineering, because that's covered in the project cost. When this project drug out for a number of reasons out of our control, first the sewer and then the water fund, basically we were budgeting on a cash basis, and we didn't account for it on a cash basis, but due to actual costs, it ended up as a cash basis, which means we were expensing those as they go along. So when the project kicks off, all of that cash is going to come back in, and the position of the fund is going to be improved immediately after the bond issue. Okay, so I mean, call Scott and you can ask him, because that is actually absolutely what is going to happen in those funds. The problem is until that happens, we are still in that negative cash position, and you know, we just have to deal with that. However, knowing moving forward that the cost of those meter replacements, that project does impact our ability to change the water meters, we're not going to be aggressive with the water fund on getting that done.
I
So
just think
that's-
that the projects we got, that we
manage
shouldn't be challenging that project right now, because it is tying up funds. Scott said we were gonna have to, more than likely, was his words, look at the water rates, water and sewer rates, to get that fund back up. So, I mean, you know, we had Multicolor pull out. Multicolor used up 20 million gallons of water a year. That's 82,000 gallons, or $82,000 of water. And you're not buying the commodity, you're paying to get it here. So there was a lot of profit in the water, because you're just paying for the power to pump it up here. We lost that. We start raising the utility rates more and more, and you're never going to get any commercial business in town here, because what attracted the commercial business was the utility rates, the reasonable utility rates. I realize our power is still reasonable, but the water and sewer are getting out of control. And you have Multicolor over there, you know, you're talking about losing money with some of the funds. You got Multicolor over there. The personal property tax that they paid over there is gone, because all the equipment's gone. There's nothing in the building, so the taxes, I believe, are throttled down over there also. You're not gonna get a business in over there. And
Well,
I
it
just
sounds like
think it's
you're gonna have
crazy.
to discuss this with Joe and Mr. Anderson.
I'd need to add one more comment. I just would like to, the biggest driver that I was asked, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago to look into this, was the ability to offer innovative rates to the electric customers of the city of Norway. That was the #1 driver in time of use rates. By the city council asked me to do that. And that is why we'd have to change all the meters to do that. The current system we have does not have the capabilities of offering innovative rates. So I just wanted to be clear that that is why this project was even started to be looked into, was at the request of the council to go with innovative rates to try to save the ratepayers of the electric utility system some money.
I'm not saying it's a bad project. I'm saying it's a bad project now for what we have going on in the
Yeah,
city.
I just wanted everybody to know why it was brought up to begin with.
Yeah, let's just be clear too, that, you know, our job is to bring information to council, and then council either approves or doesn't approve projects or the budget, you know, when we bring you to that on an annual basis, as you know, from being on before. And so, you know, having that conversation, I mean, we'll fill you up with all the details, but that council decision, I mean, if council wants us to put something on hold, put it on hold. I mean, we follow the will of the council.
Well, I think
Literally. So, I mean, it's not, we're not going
Well,
to forge ahead if council
we
as
need
a
a
whole doesn't want to do
discussion.
it.
Maybe that can be arranged
I guess
for
I'd
the
like to,
next meeting.
I'd like to make a motion that it's put on hold until we get the more information on it, and that nothing is spent, and Grant takes a look at the contract to see what's there. If the contracts are signed, if there's dates on the contract, if we can put the contract on hold or not. I'd like to make that motion, that nothing is spent or ordered.
I support that motion. I think we got some other things, especially with the things down at the hydro going on. We gotta make sure we get that priority done first. And I just don't wanna see this project reflect on the citizens. And I understand what you're saying, where people can come in and, you know, look at when to use their rates and that, but we have a lot of older citizens in this town. How are they gonna know when to use them or not? Most of them don't even have computers or anything, so I really don't see a whole lot of benefit to that. So I do support that.
Any other comments? So the motion is then that
I got one question. How much have we spent on this project so far?
80,000.
Oh, about 80, yes. We spent $70,000 for the equipment that is sitting in my shop that isn't put on the poles yet. I owe M&J Electric about $10,000 to set the poles. I don't recall exactly what the poles cost me
Poles were
to
20
put up.
grand.
Was it 20?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're at about 100, probably about 100 we've got in it right now.
I think there was 120 budgeted for this year,
Yeah. Yep.
this fiscal year.
Yep.
But I think it should be put on. hold.
130, I
Put
think,
that
Mark,
motion
because
on
I
there.
figured I had about 30 grand left for some meters. So,
do we plan on any expenditures in the next 2 weeks then, or is there anything?
over the next 2 weeks, I haven't paid M&J Electric yet for the installation of the poles. And
Well, you got to pay that anyway, whether we,
the people that were going to come and set the antenna on top contacted me late last week. They were going to come and take a look at it probably tomorrow or the next day to put the antennas on top. But that's all in the cost of the contract itself. That's no extra to have them put them on. That's part
my
of the
question
contract.
is, are we planning to spend this money in the next 2 weeks?
No. No.
Well, then-
Unless the M&J bill comes in, I have to pay them for putting the poles up.
I would like the motion to say to pay M&J because they did the work, and that nothing is ordered or nothing is spent on this project until it's researched and Grant has a chance to look at it.
You have that? Roll call?
Mr. Ball,
No.
Mrs. Brew,
Yes.
Mr. Babalani,
Yes.
Dr. Hayes.
Yes.
Mr. Menegini.
Yes.
Any other comments?
Do we need somebody to go on the ambulance board, Ray, or not? From the council? Because Jeremy was on the ambulance board.
Oh, you're right.
Still be an ambulance board.
No, he's not on the council.
No,
Gotta
no,
have
that's a
rep.
council representative. You do need to appoint somebody for the ambulance board. But they had, no, actually, the reason I didn't put that on there is because they had their meeting last week. So their next meeting isn't until after our next, after our reorganization meeting, unless they pull a special meeting.
It has to be a council member, right?
It doesn't have to be a member, it has to be a council appointed. So it could be, like what we've done is between council members or staff, is a lot of times. I've sat on boards at your direction.
Can we see if there's knowledge of anybody that's interested on the council?
Yeah, you can do it now if you would like. I just held off because I think at the reorganization meeting, you have time to do that based on your schedule.
Well, why don't we see what Jeremy wants to do?
Jeremy, he can't. I mean, it's
Still be a appointee from the council, you said.
yeah, you could. Typically, I think he's anticipating that you're going to appoint someone from the council to sit on that board. Because typically, the three members that represent the municipalities all either are staff, like, or from the board or selected boards. Most are
Well,
respected.
he's done a good job, but listen, we're gonna do that at the next meeting. I'd like to hold off on the motion on that until the
It's
next
up to you
meeting.
guys how you want to handle it.
Any other questions? Mark or comments?
No, that's all I got.
I got a couple here. Article last week, Reading considers request to take over Lake Antoine. County's trying to unload all their parks, or some of them, like we purchased, or they gave us Hanbury Lake Park a few years back here. But as I'm reading this article, this is the one that jumped out at me. Approved to place delinquent refuse and water accounts on the property owner's winter tax bills. Now, we've been talking about doing this for the 6 years I've been here, putting the liens on unpaid utility bills on the property owner's tax bills. And where are we on that, Grant?
I think reinstituted the policy, but I think you guys voted on
I
it.
mean, this has been 6 years.
You just voted on it already.
That's completed, done, we're doing that now?
We went through and worked on the
I have the packet ready to go.
packet and everything else, and we're just
It's-
ready to go.
Is it ready to go? I mean, it's enforceable right now? Or do we have to vote on that?
No, you don't have to vote on it.
You don't have to
No,
vote?
you
Oh,
made
okay,
that
because I know we
decision.
didn't vote on it.
You've made that decision. It has been held off because of, and even from the council, some of the council members on the landlords, and going back and forth with the landlords. So, but we have a complete packet we're going to send to the landlords so they can, you know, they clearly identifies what the policy is and the procedures and all that.
Okay, because it seems like a simple thing here, the way they had it.
Well, it's more complicated than that because you have a couple of different, especially for the city, with electric and cable and, you know, the water and sewer are handled under the drain code. There's an affidavit that can be filed for that. There's also affidavits that could be filed under electric, but there's different rules and laws. So one of the things I've been working with is through the Michigan Municipal Electric, the attorneys downstate have been dealing with this issue. And you know, communities, especially with electric, it's not as simple as just, you know, water and sewer. If you just have water and sewer, your average monthly bill isn't nearly as high as what we have with everything. So you want to just make sure that those legal opinions are complete. I've been working with Grant since he's come on board, giving him the information from Dickerson Wright, was one of the attorney firms that have done extended research on this over the last year or two. We're not at all in a minority on not putting it forward because of some of those rules. So, but I have the complete packet. Where it's at now is I've given that packet to Grant for review. I've given it to the staff for their comment. And I was planning to have that in your hands this month, you know, in December, first part of December, so then you can see what the packet's going to be.
Okay. Excuse me. And that water, One other item, again, out of the paper, under letters to the editor. Norway has an overlooked hazard for young children along US 2 on the west end of the city. A containment pit for water runoff should be fenced to avoid any curious children, especially with colder weather and thin ice in the near future. The pit has already had its sides made higher for more water volume. This hazard is deeper than it appears. Hopefully, the city will address this situation. Scott R. Peterson from Vulcan. I had questioned about that holding area, whatever you want to call it, and my answer was, well, that's their liability. Well, what's our liability if some little kid goes over there and drowns in it, because the place isn't even fenced off? And I can't believe that's code for the state of Michigan, where they would let something like that, because it's a swimming hole.
We have an ordinance that says you gotta put a fence around a swimming pool.
But it's not swimming.
Oh,
Well,
it's
a
not
swimming pool,
listed
it's
as
a body
swimming.
of water.
No, and I understand that.
But you
again,
tell,
it's
you
more
tell that to a
complicated.
little kid, that's, ooh, look at that, that's gonna go running over there and jump in that pool.
I understand that. I've been making some phone calls. The city of Kingsford, they fence their mitigation areas, but they have private companies with mitigation ponds that's not fenced. And, you know, I talked to Tony at length over that, and basically he said it really falls down to the liability of the insurance company of the private property holder. I talked with Dane Rosato at the county code, because that is, I was going from the erosion control, that stormwater management, that's a county-run plan. And what he told me is that under the soil and sedimentary control program, it's not addressed. It's addressed under a stormwater management program. The county does not want to have a county-run stormwater management program. So again, it circles back to us. So what response we're going to have depends on where that responsibility lies, and we're going to have that conversation at the Planning Commission again, because is that a zoning issue? I mean, is that it would go through a zoning site plan development? They are required to have a mitigation area, because otherwise they would be sending their rainwater out onto public property or in someone else's property. So they do have to handle that.
Can't they put a storm sewer in there? I mean,
Well, that was not part of, they could have, but they had an approved engineered mitigation site, or stormwater mitigation site. Now, I'm just, a theory is that the engineers are from Arkansas, and I'm not sure if they fully investigated the level of the groundwater. That's one. I don't know that because I don't do the design review or look at their design. You know, that goes through county code. The second is that this was a really bad year for groundwater. I mean, the lakes were all up all year. We've had a real high groundwater all year. So I don't know if maybe the original design, it's not, you know, it's dry, but because of the groundwater elevation, it may not be. Not sure. But just to immediately say that we have a liability, I think is making a step. And I think that Grant and I are going to have to work on that, because it does need to be reviewed. But you know, you also have the property owner. We have to maybe go to the property owner and say, look, you are responsible for this. You have to make sure it's safe.
so maybe we have to get a hold of their insurance company and saying, hey,
I'm still under review on that, or under investigation. Now, is that different than the swimming pool? So maybe we put that in our rules like we have for swimming pools. The county construction code has rules on swimming pools as well for fencing.
looks like a swimming pool to me.
Right. How about the natural, the river, the pond, the lakes? I mean, you
That
know,
we can't do anything about. This
you
was
know, so-
man-made.
Right, so I mean, I want to make sure that we're all clear going through, because if we overstep, you know, then again, we run the risk that they could say that we're overstepping with any of the current rules that we have. And again, that's something I'm going to have to work with Grant to make sure we don't do
Okay.
that.
And one other thing, while we're on that subject right there, can we do something with Mr. Beck's property there? I mean, it's pretty much of an eyesore,
Okay.
with all them barrels and whatnot that he has piled up there.
Any other comments?
What is Beck's all about?
Well, he owns the old railroad grade. So he owns across the alley. Well, we just
Yeah, yeah.
vacated the alley.
I had a couple of concerns, have been thinking we need to do something with the spring. That's one of our city's biggest untapped assets. I think we need to, I've said this many times in the past, but I thought I should just mention it again tonight since we're getting things off our chest. And the other great asset that we need to pay attention to is Norway Hill. That's an untapped resource that we have. I hate to see it become a money pit, no pun intended, where we're just throwing money at fencing people off. I think we need to find uses for that area, recreational, residential, find some uses and get something positive out of the area, not just a negative thing. And the third thing I'd like to mention is that yet I think the DDA needs to put in a sidewalk so people can get out to the churches on the south side of the highway. To me, it looks like there's no real room in the front of the businesses because there's signs and driveways, and that would be as hazardous as walking down the highway, but perhaps behind the...
As mayor, you are now a member of the DDA. It's an automatic
Oh,
seat,
okay.
so we're glad to have you on board.
Okay. So at that, Joe, do you have any other comments?
No, I do not.
I will say the creek was still up Sunday, so yesterday. So it looks like you're still getting some
We're
water.
doing very well on power.
Any comments? Charles?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Trish? Okay, any other comments?
No, again, congratulations to Candy and Mark and to Lee.
Thanks.
Welcome aboard. And we did have item under executive session to bring you up to speed on pending litigation, and we did talk about contract negotiation. Grant, I think you had some concerns about that one.
Well, on the pending litigation, I think we need to discuss a little further in closed session regarding the issues that are outstanding with the city of Norway. We have ongoing, as far as contract negotiations, referencing the upcoming negotiation with the employees. Those referencing.
No, with the Golf Commission.
Well, as to the negotiations with the Gulf Commission, I'm pleased to report to the council at this point, Ray and I have meeting with the Gulf Commission. I would suggest and say to the council that these discussions have been very good, very positive, very motivated to try to find a resolution. One of the things that, as we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of the resolution, and as we get to the point of a final determination of how we're going to make this transition work, I think Ray and I have kind of narrowed down a few of the issues that seem to be sticking points with both the council and the Gulf Commission. I think it would be helpful because, as Ray hinted at, or especially stated earlier, Ray as the city manager serves at the pleasure of council, and certainly as an attorney, I do the same. I take direction from the city council and then try to also advise you folks as well as to the legalities of certain actions and how we proceed. So when it comes down to working with the Gulf Commission, working through some of these issues, I think it would be helpful if we could have a couple council members with us to have a feel for the council itself on what things are priorities, because as Ray and I discussed with the commission, we're trying to read your minds a little bit on what the council would like to see as a final resolution. I think we all have the same goal, but ultimately having one, two, or three council members, actually I think we need two, we can't have three, but having two council members, if somebody is willing to assist in those negotiations and be with us, the commission has their representatives. I think it also would help the council be informed in detail about where we're at with things to help bring this hopefully to a successful closure, working with one of our finer resources here in the community.
I've been saying for 2 years I want to be in on that.
I wouldn't mind being in on it
So
either.
is that a volunteer then, Lee?
Oh, yes.
Good. Okay, and Candy as well. Be great.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And that brings up the issue, I'm sure you're going to be ahead of the game to know what things Ms. Brew can vote on and what she cannot vote on.
And that's one of the things I was waiting until we saw how everything panned out with the makeup of the council. She and I chatted ever so briefly. I've had the pleasure of working with Ms. Brew in the past on the school board, and just indicated before we started that I'd want to chat with her just a little bit, just to make sure we can head off any issues down the road. I believe she's still on the school board. and just make sure we don't have any conflicts that arise, and if so, we have a policy and a procedure in place for Ms. Brute to abstain from any voting as it pertains to any conflicts that might arise. So we did talk about meeting after today's meeting to go over some of those issues.
And we did, we handed out those conflict of interest statements, so just fill those out. Everybody, it's good to have us review those or fill those out on an annual basis anyway. Staff does the same thing. So,
Other comments? There will be an executive session. There will not be any motions after the executive session. Does need a
we need a motion to go into executive session.
I make a motion, we go into executive session.
Support.
And could you add to that motion, would you mind, for litigation?
For litigations against the city of Norway,
Yeah.
for the city of Norway.
Mrs. Brew,
Yes.
Mr. Babalani,
Yes.
Dr. Hayes.
Yes.
Mr. Menegini.
Yes.
Mr. Ball.
Yep.